Hi, I'm Holly. I'm the mom.
I'm Sydney, I'm the daughter, and welcome to Doc Talk, where this week we're going to be discussing the documentary Abducted in Plain Sight.
This is one of the creepiest documentaries I've ever watched. I would say it's in my top five for like wildest shit I've ever seen.
Oh, definitely. It's just I feel like it's a roller coaster from the very start to the ending.
Yeah,
Like there's just no point, especially there's no point where you're thinking, "Oh, I know what's going to happen next." No.
you are not.
No,
You
you
will
don't.
never.
The documentary starts off with a man named Robert Birchtold talking about a little girl, presumably Jan, discussing her physical attributes intensely and saying he found the little girl he was searching for. We see Abducted in Plain Sight in Pocatello, Idaho, and that was in the 1970s, which they described their neighborhood as safe and friendly, and there was no need to lock their doors. But if you actually go and do a little bit of searching, in the 1970s, Pocatello had a 40,000 person population. So it wasn't a small town by any means. It was actually a growing city, which
Which is about the size of like where we live.
yeah, it's a pretty large place, especially for the 1970s, for that many
Right,
people to be there.
for sure.
Um, and I actually found that information over at the Showbiz cheat sheet because apparently Google did not know the answer to that question. So we see the story start off with Jan Broberg, and she has two younger sisters. Her sister Karen being the middle, and Susan being the youngest. And as far as she described, before everything that was happening, she had a really great childhood. There was nothing in the home that would bring any suspicion as to, abuse or neglect or anything like that. They just generally were happy kids and, they felt safe with other families and other children. So there came to a point where actually all of the Broberg children started calling Robert. They called him B or Brother B. So they had like a specific nickname for him, which to me felt weird because like I don't maybe this is just me, but growing up like either I would call my friends by mom or I would call them, Miss or Mrs. or not just the one parent, but I would address them um, respectfully, I would say. And not to say this is disrespectful, it's just odd.
Well, especially if it's not a nickname that other people are calling them, that now it's just
Yeah.
something the kids are calling them, which I think is always a red flag when people are not people, but adults are developing a relationship with children where they have little ins and, inside jokes and
Yeah.
nicknames that aren't something that's shared by the adults as well.
Well, and also the brother B. It was very weird because you're an adult man. You are not their brother. You're old enough to be their father or their uncle.
I thought it was something religious. They never really delve into what the brother part is. I thought it was a religious thing.
That would make sense. So, along with him calling him his own nickname, a lot of I don't know if it was his own children. We don't hear from any of his own children. We only hear from the Broberg sisters. But Karen and Susan noticed that he was paying a lot of attention to Jan, and that also he gave her own nickname. And she said that he had a lot of nicknames for her, but the one that stood out to her the most was when he called her Dolly, which I just feel is so bizarre.
And creepy.
It's
It's
creepy.
super creepy. The minute they said that, I just and it because my nickname from Pop was Holly Dolly,
Mm-hmm.
and so even just hearing this and knowing where this, even the first time I watched it, just knowing where this is going, it grossed me out about my own nickname.
Yeah, because it's just taking something that's so it's innocent and sweet and fun, and he's using it in a gross,
Yes.
malicious way. So there was a point where they were doing a tape recording of Robert, and he was speaking about an interaction that he was having with Jan, which he actually said, "Dolly, you've brought a special light into my life. I love you more than words can tell." Where it ended with him kissing her on the lips. and saying, "No man could love any woman more." And I mistakenly did not write it down, but at this time she's about like 11, somewhere around there. And it's, why are you kissing? Why are you, like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
The minute any man starts talking about or I mean, any adult, period, doesn't have to be a man, any adult starts talking about your kid in a romantic, because that's 100% romantic. And
Mm-hmm.
you can say, that these parents were naive or whatever. And maybe I was just brought up stranger danger about everything. Not even stranger danger, but that everybody was dangerous. Everyone had capacity to be dangerous.
Trust no one.
Trust no one. You never know someone for real. And so maybe that was just the way I was brought up. My alarm bells would have been going off so much like sooner
Well, and
than it would
especially,
than this. And if it had gotten to this, there would have been a restraining order.
yeah, well, and especially for the fact, if you're referring to a person that is under the age of 18 as a woman, and when you're talking about like teenagers and you say like, "Oh, you're a young woman," like that's an acceptable thing, unless of course you're being creepy.
Right.
But
The
to
context
call,
matters.
yes, but to call a child who basically just got into the double digits, to call her a woman, "No man could ever love a woman more." No, that should be you talking about your wife, not talking about the little girl from down the street.
And that is such a common play in the pedophile playbook,
Oh yeah,
to womanize children. And they call them underage women, and it's like, no, those are children.
they're children. They're literally minors.
Right. It doesn't matter if they're 15. Technically you're not a child anymore, but you're definitely still a minor.
Yes.
You're not an underage woman.
Yes.
You're a girl.
You're a girl. So Karen actually shared at one point that he was talking to Jan, and he was basically saying, "You're getting a little bit older now. Wouldn't you like to have your own room?" And at this time, because, I don't know how large their house was, but Jan and Karen shared a room, and they slept on either side of the wall. And so, Jan was like, "Yeah, that's a great idea." So Robert then built a wall between their two bedrooms, which was just exactly what his ploy was. It was another way that he could get her alone. It was another way that he could separate her from her family. And it's an isolation tactic,
Mhm.
which is what a lot of them do. They want to isolate you to ensure basically their own safety.
Right. Because he's got plans. He's got big plans.
Yeah.
And he certainly can't have little sister seeing what he wants to do
Yep.
and what's to come.
Yep.
And I believe didn't they describe the bedroom as being in the basement?
Yes, the bedroom was in the basement. So yeah, there was only one stairway to get down there, and then there was a couple windows that you could basically get up out of. And I can't imagine it was, terribly big of a basement.
Right.
Just strange.
Again, I mean, these parents are super naive because they think he's just doing something nice.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, maybe I was just raised just different, but I am always looking for the ulterior motive when it comes to people talking about children that aren't theirs.
Absolutely.
I would rather not give somebody the benefit of the doubt and be wrong than give them the benefit of the doubt and be wrong.
Yes, exactly. Better be safe than sorry.
Yes.
I would rather be safe a million times than be sorry once.
Yes.
Because they're going to pay a huge price, and they don't even know it yet. They don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
The Broberg and the Birchtold children actually had a lot of sleepovers. They had a bigger house over at the Birchtolds, obviously because they have more children. They had a huge trampoline. So they would go out and they would all get their little sleeping bags, and they'd all get up there and they'd sleep at night. And Jan describes an experience where at one point she woke up and she noticed that her underwear were down around her ankles. And, when she kind of came to a little bit more, she realized that Robert, the father of her friends, is laying next to her, and he says to her, "Oh, you were fidgeting a lot in your sleep. You must have gotten uncomfortable and pulled them down."
Right. And these parents were super naive because why are you letting your child go to sleepovers where one of the parents is, I mean, obviously you want them present in the house, but you don't want them sleeping in the
With the children,
vicinity of
yeah.
your children. And I can totally see, how parents nowadays are just, they've know too much, and sleepovers are off limits for a lot of parents nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
I can't I can't say if I was raising you during this time period, if I would be okay with sleepovers, because you just know more now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think also too, just in the beginning with everything happening, like he wasn't quite working on the parents yet. He was being a generally nice guy, but he wasn't quite working on them yet. And so I think this was just I think they just were I don't even think it was naivety. I think it was turning a blind eye. It turns into that because of the way he works them.
I do question though. I mean, I really do think it was more being naive. Because it wasn't that he was just being nice. He was paying way too much attention to one child in particular, and it seems like it was, if it was obvious to her younger sister, it should have been obvious to her parents.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that it wasn't makes me think that they were super naive. Or I mean, like you said, turning a blind eye, but I don't think turning a blind eye like it's okay if this guy molests our kid.
Yeah, no, that's sorry. I should clarify that's not what I mean. I think it's turning a blind eye as like, he's a nice guy, he's a father, he's coming to church. It's basically just he's a good guy, so I'll just leave it be.
But I view that as being naive and
Mm.
thinking, well, he goes to church and he's a godly man and he's a good man, so he must not ever be interested in children.
Yeah. So in June of 1973, Jan actually accompanied the Birchtolds on a trip to Seattle. Um, I'm not sure why the other two children weren't invited or if Jan just asked to go. I assume that she was invited. So she accompanied them to Seattle, which she had gone on trips with them previously. So it wasn't like out of the norm, supposedly. We don't really hear much about any other trips. But in this trip, I guess there was an incident where the Birchtold family and Jan were having dinner, and all of a sudden she starts swaying, and she's talking funny and whatever. And so Robert is like, "Oh, I'll take her back up to the room. Obviously, this child is not well." And so he takes her back up to the hotel room. So Jan describes that even though she was super groggy, she woke up and she saw him walking around the room naked. And she told her sisters that, and she didn't tell anybody else. But obviously, like it's pretty clear that she was drugged at that
Right,
point.
for
Like
sure.
he slipped something into her drink or her food, and he drugged her so that he could get her up to the hotel room by herself. And
Yeah.
it's just so like I just feel awful. Just imagine thinking that you're going with a family and you're going to go have a good time, and then all of a sudden you're seeing, this man that she does look up to him. She sees him as a member of her family, and all of a sudden he's walking around in front of you naked.
Well, and I have to wonder too, was this the first time he drugged her, or did he also drug her that night that they slept on the trampoline?
Hmm.
Because how do you sleep through? First of all, like, why did he take her underwear off if he wasn't going to do anything? And if he was doing something, it would have woken her up.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel like he probably drugged her at that point too.
Probably.
And that may have been a test to see how it was going to go for this trip.
Mm-hmm. Which would make...
Of course, I don't know how much time was in between those two incidences.
Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't describe a whole lot, and there was nothing that I could find later on. So I'm not exactly sure, the exact timeline. But honestly, that would be pretty valid, like for that to be a case.
Yeah, because if you're going to do this in front of your kids and your wife, you want to make sure it's going to be right. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to happen the way you want it to. So I can't imagine that trip was the first time he tried that.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm sure that there was probably some test of, is she gonna pass out immediately? Because I'm sure if she did, that would have ended up with like a hospital visit.
Right.
And then it would have ruined his plans.
Right.
And obviously, you know, she only woke up to him walking around naked. Who knows what he did before or after her waking up?
Exactly.
You know? And obviously, she doesn't remember any of that. She couldn't feel any of it. So honestly, I think it is super likely that that was what happened on the trampoline as well. So sometime after the trip, Robert actually started flirting a little bit more with Marianne, Jan's mother. He would occasionally call her up and, hey, I'm so hungry. Could you bring me down a sandwich to work? And, you know, run him little favors and errands. And he was so sweet and nice to her. She started to feel as though through time that she was kind of getting out of him what she was missing in her own husband, Bob. So she, you know, basically developed a crush on him.
Which is what he wanted.
Oh yeah, this is exactly what he wanted. She's playing directly into his hand. And then they went out to Utah for some sort of trip, some sort of church trip. I guess they stopped on like the side of the road somewhere. She said they got a little too cozy and things got carried away. She said that he touched her boobs, but she didn't really allude anything more into that. I think she was trying to basically make it sound like, you know, it never led into sex. It didn't go as far as that, but it was, I'm assuming, pretty hot and heavy little makeout session or something.
And I don't think she's lying because she's pretty open about the whole thing. So I don't think that she's lying. I think that's what happened and that she was like, I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, because I think that, you know, this was the first person that she had really ever been with besides Bob. I'm sure she dated other boys in high school and everything like that. But, you know, with their type of religion, I'm pretty sure that you're not supposed to have sex or anything until you're married. And so she had never experienced another man. So having someone who has this passion and this flirty little banter and like stuff like that, you know, it's exciting for her. And he's getting exactly what he wants out of her.
Right. The thing is she is definitely playing into it, you know, but she's playing checkers and this man's playing chess.
Oh,
and
yeah.
There's a long game here and she doesn't even see it coming.
Oh, yeah. And of course, you know, he's starting to tell her stuff too, like, oh, I want you and this and that. Just, I wish I could run away with you and I wish I could be married to you. And basically just, he's reeling her in as close as he can get her. So at some point there is a scene where Robert and Bob, which Bob is Jan's father, they're going out for a car ride and Robert starts talking about how, oh, you know, my marriage is awful, my sex life is terrible, you know, she never gives in and whatever. And then he looks over at Bob and he says, Bob, could you give me some relief? What are we talking about here? What are we talking about? Could you give me some relief? And then he goes, it's just boy things, Bob. It's just boy stuff. Not at your grown 40-year-old age, it's not. Robert, no. Could you give me some relief?
But then
Bob
he does it.
But then he does it.
I just remember, I'm even speechless now. Like,
Then I did.
and he was so I mean, I appreciate both the parents' honesty and realizing how much they were played as well.
Yes.
But I don't know any man who would just be like, sure, I'll jack you off. Like we're both married to women. And as far as I know, you're not in the closet. I'm not in the closet, but let me jack you off. Like, I don't, like, I don't get it.
There hadn't been any like flirting or anything like that before. Like, it wasn't like a build up. It was just, my wife never gives me sex. Will you jerk me off, bro? Yeah, sure.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if they had some sort of flirtation and
yes,
and maybe, like you said, a build up to this,
but
no, like, it came out of nowhere, and you know, Dad was like, sure. What are friends for?
You know what? Just for that fruit basket? I will.
Right?
I will, bro.
Look, if you don't have friends like that will do this, why even have friends?
Do you want a little blowy with it as well?
Right.
Like, what are y'all doing? It's just boy things.
So now he's reeled in both parents.
Oh, yes. Now he has them exactly where he wants them. He's put them in a trap. And then it just all starts to unravel from there.
So after they, reveal this, they don't really go back to it. But twice, the dad, Bob, mentions during the interview process that he had a homosexual relationship with B, which makes me think this was not the only time and that their relationship continued just like it did with Mom.
I think so as well, because there was actually a point where in one of the tapes that they play of Robert, he says that as well. He only says it once, but he says, I had to have a homosexual relationship with the father in order to get close to Jan. He literally says that. So I think that you're correct. I think that was just the start, and there was probably so much more that we don't even know about. But of course, this is coming from a religious family, so I'm sure that there's probably more that he just doesn't want to share.
Right.
Which, from coming from the Latter-day Saints, that was already huge enough for him to admit to millions of people.
True.
So I actually stole a screen grab off of the documentary itself, and it reads, according to the FBI, in January of 1974, Berchtold was reprimanded by the High Council of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because of his involvement with another young girl. So this wasn't even about Jan. This was about a different girl. Completely.
Well, I mean, pedophiles generally aren't super picky about which child, just whatever child they think that they can manipulate the parent. Like, most pedophiles are very intelligent hunters.
Mm-hmm.
They look for parents that are either not involved or are super naive and believe that everyone's good and kumbaya.
Yeah.
Or, they look for kids that, and I don't know how they do this, but I feel like kids that have been abused in the past, somehow these sickos see that in them. And if they know that they've not told anyone, they are a target again.
Yep.
There
Exactly.
are so many kids and adults now that I've heard of that have different points in their lives been abused by different people.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's almost like they can see it in these kids that they've been a target and that they didn't tell anyone and that they can be a target again for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just insane to me.
Yeah, no, literally, that's right on the money there, because it's just, it's easy to get away with for them. They're
Right.
Like, oh, and they make it out to these children of, oh, do you know how to keep a secret? Like, that's why it's so important to your children that, obviously when they get older and they're keeping secrets about certain things, I think that's fine. But young children should not have secrets, because it becomes a very dangerous area.
Right.
Because say, I go tell my son right now, oh, keep this secret. Well, if mama wants me to keep a secret, I can keep a secret for anybody.
Right.
And it's so dangerous.
Yeah, you think that you're doing something benign by saying, don't tell dad that we're getting ice cream after dinner.
Mm-hmm.
But that don't tell dad can turn into something horrible if they are around the wrong people.
Exactly. And especially other people they trust. Children who get molested by pastors and teachers and social workers and, so many others.
Relatives,
and it's because one trustworthy person has told them not to tell another person before. And it's so sad. It's such a slippery slope that it can be too. You really don't think that you're doing any harm in saying stuff like that to your kids.
That's not the only thing that leads up to that.
Yeah.
There's also, making sure that I know a lot of parents are uncomfortable with talking about genitalia with their kids, especially small children.
Mm-hmm.
But it's super important that your children know that no one should be touching really their body at all if they don't want them to.
Exactly.
And, and then you make very clear the parts that nobody touches.
Yes.
There are lots of articles and books out there that, parents with young kids can definitely read or look up just to know what's appropriate for your children at their age. But it's super important for your kids to realize there are people out there that are waiting for a kid who has not been taught these things to just come their way.
Exactly. So Robert was being counseled by the LDS church, and part of his therapy was, kind of putting himself out there and being vulnerable. So he actually had told Bob, Jan's father, that there was an aunt that made him have sex with her when he was only 4 years old, which there, as far as I'm aware, there is no evidence that, fully backs that up. I don't know if it is a true claim. It very well could be, but it's not an excuse.
Right, exactly.
So a part of Robert's therapy was that his counselor gave him some tapes to listen to through some little headphones, and he told the Brobergs that part of his therapy was also, while he listened to these tapes, that he had to lay next to, he explained it as, I have to spend time with the girls, when in reality he would just go and lay in Jan's bed and just stay there all night and do God knows what. Who the fuck knows what he's doing in there? Nobody, because she's in a secluded room. And basically what these tapes were saying, it was so gross listening to what the tape said, because it was like, it was talking about the waves rushing over you, but then it would start saying, and the way she touches you and rubs you. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is like sexual therapy, basically. And he's doing it laying next to this girl.
With her parents' permission.
With her parents' permission. And he says to Bob, he's like, oh, you can call my counselor and, make sure. And Bob goes, no, that's okay. I trust you.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, how much leeway can you really give these parents for being naive? Because at some point, they cannot be this fucking stupid. Look, I'm going to say it. I just don't, and I understand there's a lot of religious households where parents raise their kids to be super sheltered, and then those people marry another super sheltered person, and then they have a family. That may be the case for, mom and dad, and they may have been super, sheltered their whole life. All of these things, and they're like, well, it's part of his therapy.
Yeah. Like, how is that going to be your main excuse?
Right. Like, it's okay that this grown-ass man lays with I think at this point she's like 12 or 13.
I would say around there, yes.
Lays with our almost preteen.
Yeah.
And because some random therapist said that that's what he needed to do. Like I said, you can only give them a pass for so long. And I feel like at this point, every alarm should have been going off in their heads.
Because I think also at this point, because he was involved, because they found out he was involved with another girl and was getting counseled, I think that they had started to kind of put some distance between him and Jan as well. But then, of course, he comes up with the whole elaborate therapy story. So he gets right back in there.
Right. And what's crazy to me is that, Dad, Bob, is the one who started to pull away first. That he actually started to have an inkling about what was going on with Jan. And, where are this mother's maternal instincts? Because I feel like this woman has zero.
She has the instincts of a slab of concrete.
Like yes, she's loving, and they had great childhoods until, B moves in next door or down the street or whatever. But like I said, this documentary has just been the craziest thing I've ever, I've seen a lot of crazy shit. I've been watching crime documentaries for 20 years, love true crime, been into, when I was 10, my aunt, Mary, let me watch Faces of Death. Like real people dying, caught on video. I was 10. Thank you, Mary. And this is still crazier than that.
Yeah.
It is. Like, I can't imagine every alarm, every red flag and just being like, it's nothing. It's nothing.
She just put on her rose-colored glasses. You cannot blame her.
Those glasses had to have been blackouts. Because how did you not see any? This doesn't make any sense.
I know. I think by this point, she probably also had some pretty far developed feelings for Robert.
Right.
Which I think that really blinded her to her. I mean, I don't think she had maternal instincts really in the beginning when it came down to everything he already did. But especially this, I think she just, like, she had let her walls down completely because I think she just wanted to be with him so bad. And he kept telling her, I want you, I want you, I want you.
But wouldn't you at some point say, well, if you want to be with me so bad, then why do you want to hang out with my kid all the time?
I know. So according to a court transcript, actually, Robert slept in Jan's bed approximately 4 times a week for 6 months, right up until October 17th.
And he was doing stuff to that kid.
Absolutely. Like, he was, it had to have been an every night thing. And, I just feel so fucking awful that she was just subjected to this. And
the people that are supposed to protect her are actually giving her abuser permission.
They're opening the door.
Yeah. They're like, come into our home and get in bed with our child.
So just when you thought that the story was getting insane already, it gets so much more fucking wild that you would not even believe. It starts to unfurl rapid succession, really. Like, it's a train that doesn't stop. So on October 17th in 1974, Marianne actually gets a call from Robert, and he's offering to take Jan horseback riding. And she's saying, oh, please let me go. I want to go. Marianne actually makes a couple excuses to Robert saying, oh, it's a school night, or, she has a piano lesson. And he just says, well, I can pick her up after the piano lesson. And so he basically doesn't let her get the no in at all. He's not taking no for an answer. So he does exactly that. He comes after her piano lesson. He picks her up. He gives her some allergy pills for the horses. And she all of a sudden kind of just goes under and doesn't remember or recollect anything. She has no memory of any part of the drive, of ever getting out of the car, of ever even seeing any horses, which obviously by now we know that they are not real. And so, time comes and goes, and this is at the point where Marianne is getting freaked out because she's told Robert and Jan, be back before, I can't remember if it was either before dinner or before Dad got home, but regardless, you need to be back at a certain time. And time passes, and they haven't heard from them. And there's no way to get a hold of them because this is the 1970s. There's no cell phones.
Right.
There's no way to just, really go out and find where they are because all he said was horseback riding. Of course, I don't know how many horse ranches are in and around Pocatello, but he doesn't give them any whereabouts. And so Marianne invites Gail over, and Gail is, of course, she's concerned because, this is her husband that's missing. But when Bob and Marianne say that they're going to call the police, Gail basically is like, oh, no. Well, we don't have to do that. And kind of makes it seem as though it would upset her if they were to contact the authorities.
Right, which makes me wonder, does she know that her husband is a pedophile and doesn't want him to get caught? Or is she just as blind to what's happening as these other people? I have a feeling she knew because, B had been caught before, according to the church, and, he had been counseled. And so I have a feeling she knew. And, back then, I don't know what her options were if her husband ended up in jail. They've got 5 kids. She's probably not working.
Yeah.
I would imagine in the LDS faith, that's not normal for the woman to work. They're usually traditional wives.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty gross, though, if you are more worried about that than the fact that your husband has taken off with a 13-year-old
Yes.
or 12, or I'm not sure
She's
how old.
about 12 or 13
Yeah.
at this time. And yeah, like, and I understand, I don't want to call the police and, maybe that's your husband, but that's their children. And it should not have been her decision. I mean, it wasn't really her decision. It was more of her just convincing them not to. And like, I just don't understand how there's no alarm bells saying, I don't care, I'm going to call the police anyways.
Exactly. As a parent.
So a couple days go by, and so despite what Gail has told the Broberg family, Marianne has gone and she's called the FBI office, which of course now a couple days passing, this happened on Thursday, we're getting into Saturday. And so, she calls them, she doesn't get an answer. They do give her a number of, it literally says, if this is an emergency, please contact this line. And then, I'll wait one more day, and just doesn't follow through with making that other call. And I'm just so confused of like, if you're already on the phone, how are you not going to take the extra couple seconds to, because you were already ready to talk to someone.
Right. You got on the phone with the intention to call someone because your kid is missing. And then you're like, oh, this one more call is just too much. I'm not going to do it. I mean, this isn't a frigging gas station where they've told you need to go in and see the cashier. Yes. Where you're just like, fuck that. I'm out of here. I'm going to another one.
I know. Exactly. Like, I am not going to, I will fucking burn this car down before I go in and see that motherfucker. Right. I won't.
The thing is every adult in this child's world is putting themselves over her. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them.
Oh, yes. Like, I understand, each girl feeling as though they were listened to and they were cared for and such, but was Jan really? Because, I mean, think about it. Jan was the oldest daughter, and a lot of people talk about, I mean, basically it's known as the oldest daughter syndrome. And it's to be where she probably took a lot of care of her younger sisters. She probably was very maternal towards them because a lot of older daughters do that.
Right.
And so, I think that they just, I think they probably did treat Karen and Susan like that. But I think when it came to Jan, they probably treated her in a more mature way before she was even ready to be treated like that. It's so sad because she was failed miserably.
Right. Because you've got Gail, the wife, that doesn't want the police called in. Mm-hmm. You've got, mom who doesn't want to be a bother to any, because that was what she said. I don't want to cause a big stink over this. And her kid's been gone for 4 days with a grown man.
Yeah.
I don't know. Every adult in this child's life failed her miserably.
Yes.
Basically handed her to be on a silver platter.
Mm-hmm. So Jan actually later that night, she's kind of in and out. She's a little groggy, but she realizes her hands and her ankles are tied, and she's tied down to some sort of cushion or bed or something. And she's kind of looking around. She can't see too much. It's dark. And she hears this like little monotone voice. Can't really understand what it's saying because it's a little, weird sounding. So yeah, it's very monotone, very robotic sounding. These little voices are talking to her, and then she goes back into sleep. And then eventually she comes back to, and she sees that the bounds have actually been taken off of her. And this box starts talking to her, and they're saying, we're aliens, and I wish I had written their names. It was something like Xena and like Zephyr or something like that.
Yeah.
And just very, alienistic names. And so they told her, you're part alien. Your mom is your biological mom, but your father is actually an alien, and you're from a different planet. And they start telling her about this mission, and they're explaining to her, and the whole time they're calling her the female companion, which as soon as I heard that shit, I was like, holy fuck, what do you mean female companion?
Right.
And so they're telling her about this mission. They're saying, to save this alien race and their planet, you have to you have to seek out the male companion, and you have to become pregnant by the age of 16, which is fucking crazy. And so, she's 13. And so she's like, yes, I will do that. And so, she goes out, and I think it's like a motorhome, and she goes out of the bedroom, and she sees Robert on the couch, passed out, and he's all like bloody, and he's bruised, and he's cut up. And the box said, I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was like, if you go out there, you'll find the male companion. So obviously, who's the first person she sees? Robert, male companion.
Right.
So obviously at this point, she now knows my mission is with Brother B. And so, I think it had to do with them being abducted, because basically he told her that they were abducted by aliens.
Right.
And so, they were rough on him, and they beat him up and whatever, trying to protect Jan.
Right.
And so they come to a mutual understanding that this is their mission. Well, obviously, it's not a mutual understanding.
Right.
He set this up. But in her mind, it's a mutual understanding. Which at this point, the aliens also make it clear that if she is to fail the mission, that her sister, and I can't remember if it was Susan or Karen, but one of them was also half alien, and that if Jan could not complete it, they would carry it out with her sister.
And that, they're the only way of saving their planet was her doing this.
Yes.
It put a lot of pressure on her, and she really believed it. And I get, when you're 13 and this shit's happening to you, this has got to be crazy.
Yeah.
And I can see how, if you've got another adult who's verifying this is what happened, how you could believe it.
Yes.
But I just, and I'm not blaming her at all. I'm saying the fact that her parents never prepared her for any sort of dangerous adult in her life is why she is stuck where she is right now.
Exactly.
And why she believes this shit that he's telling her.
Mm-hmm. So the little white speaker device starts talking again, and it's explaining to Jan that it is time for the female and the male companion to have sex. And they go into the bedroom, and she describes that it was only ever an inch at a time, which just was very strange to me. But I understand why, because he planned this all so precisely. I'm sure in his mind, he did not want to leave any sort of, he didn't want to break her hymen. He didn't want to leave any sort of sexual trauma. He did this very well.
Oh, yeah. He was expert level pedophile,
yes.
for sure. He was so far ahead of anybody else in, as far as where this plan was and how crazy he was willing to let things get. And evidenced by, what they had already believed, he knew he could pull this off too.
Yeah.
Because they had already believed this other shit.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they believe something a little bit crazier?
Jan basically describes that he seemed to be concerned, that he wanted to make sure that she was also enjoying the experience, which to me just furthers the thought of he really is trying to make her seem like a woman,
right?
Like a full grown adult. Only adults should be concerned if adults are enjoying sex.
Well, I think it was, he knows what he's doing is wrong.
Yes.
So I think it's kind of in a way, it's assuaging his guilt and being like, but she is enjoying it, so it's not wrong.
Yeah.
I really think that was, probably what would be his mindset, because why else would he care?
Yeah. And I just felt so bad because at one point she's talking about how it breaks my heart. She's talking about how at the top of the motorhome there's this little window and she can see tree branches that are waving, and she's like, I'm getting choked up right now talking about it. She's just waiting for the experience to be over.
Right.
And it's awful because
but he's convinced her that she is enjoying it.
Yes. And
And
she
she's
just,
not. I mean,
she
she's
just
his child still.
she just wants it to be over, and she was like, all I could do was just watch the branches wave and just wait, and that's awful. Like, at that point, she's become cognizant enough that she knows she doesn't want it, but she has the pressure of a whole different world on her that doesn't even exist.
Right.
But she feels it in her body, and that's so sad. So on October 22nd, 1974 is finally when FBI agent Pete Welch has been put on the case. And, he's, first of all, very shocked that it's been 5 days that they did not contact him.
Right.
And, he's talking to Mary Ann, and she's like, oh, well, I don't think he kidnapped her. And then he had to proceed to convince them, yes, he kidnapped your daughter. This is a grown man, and he's taken her to a location you don't know. He kidnapped her. Like, how do you have to be convinced of that?
Exactly. Like, your child's been gone for 5 days, and it is taking an law enforcement officer to convince you that she's kidnapped.
Yes.
But what I just don't understand is, how do you go 5 days of your child being with a grown man somewhere? You don't know where. They've made no contact with you. And it takes a law enforcement officer to convince you
Yes.
that they've been kidnapped. I just, like I said earlier, how do you continue to give them a pass that they're just naive people?
Yeah.
You can't, no one can be this naive.
Yeah. They go and they interview Gail, because, obviously she's the wife. She must know something. But all she knows is that he has a motorhome in a storage unit. And when they go and check that storage unit, motorhome's gone.
Surprise.
Surprise. So they found Robert's car, actually. And they found that the side door basically, looked as if it had been, broken into. The car was super roughed up, and there was actually blood inside of the car. So it was staged and made to look like they had both been kidnapped, that they had both been beaten up and taken.
Oh, so that's the whole reason why I didn't really think about that until just now, when she comes out of the RV's bedroom and he's all bloody and bruised. It's just in case they got caught.
Yes.
So he could say, I didn't do it. I'm a victim too. And I didn't even catch on to that until you just brought that up.
Yep. Yeah. He's staged a duo kidnapping instead of a solo.
This guy is, his predator level is off the fucking chart. And again, like I said, I mean, every adult failed her, but I don't know I hesitate to say good at what he does.
He was dangerously intelligent.
Yeah. And, I don't know, even if she had parents that were more aware, if he could have figured out a way around it anyway.
Yeah. He's so intelligent to the point of, like, he's not just 2 steps ahead. It feels like he's 10 steps ahead of all of these people. It's insane. So then Peter Welch actually went ahead and he started interviewing some people that would know Robert, like some of the neighbors, which, there was a lot of mixed reviews between neighbors, where there were some who, he's a perfectly nice guy, he's part of LDS and, all that. But there were some who said that they noticed he had an infatuation with little girls.
So it's possible that there are people that he wouldn't have been able to get through because they weren't fucking stupid.
Yeah. And then Pete actually interviewed Joe, Robert's brother, and even Joe made comments about how he was a sexual pervert, and he basically was like, I don't know what it was, but he always liked his little girls. So gross.
Yeah, and creepy. And I'm not saying that his brother is also a sicko, but it was weird.
Like, that, and like, he doesn't ever, I mean, he knows enough to be telling Pete that he is, a sexual pervert and attracted to little girls. So it's like, so you've known.
Right.
You've had to have known for some time. And that just, I feel as though, and not to say that his brother's a bad guy, but I think that makes his brother just as much at fault as a lot of people involved. But of course, it's also, I mean, back then, like, people didn't know what a pedophile was.
I mean, they did, but it was
Just-
just something that people didn't want to talk about and didn't want to discuss. And if you pushed the issue, you know, he might get brought into jail and then let go later that day.
Well, I mean, Pete Welch even said, like, he's in the FBI at this point, and he said, I didn't even really know what a pedophile was. He said, I had heard of them, but I didn't know what they were, to the point that I wasn't even sure if it was in the dictionary.
Before the 80s, because I grew up in the 80s, and that was really the time when there was a lot of public service announcements where one of the things that they suggested doing was have a password with your kids, so that when you send somebody to pick them up from school, the kids ask, what's the password?
Yeah.
And Nana used to do that for us, and we would change it up every once in a while. And, you know, that was how we always knew that we were safe.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing is, you know, but we were taught stranger danger, you know, and now we're in a different generation where that's not something you should be teaching kids, because oftentimes it's not strangers.
It's
Kids are
people they
more
know.
likely to be abducted by someone they know
Yeah.
than a stranger now.
Well, I mean, even just with this case alone, this really wasn't even stranger danger.
No.
He got to know them to the point that there was no sense in their mind that he was a stranger, that he was a part of their family.
Right.
It's more than likely going to always be someone that you know, or that your child knows.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm super grateful that we've changed how we teach kids, and that we've realized that stranger danger is actually not something that is reliable to teach your kids.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that should be included, because that also applies. There are
Yes.
still, you know, people out there that will kidnap your kids. More often than not, it's not a stranger.
Yes. So they actually had brought up that Robert tried to get close with 2 different Pocatello girls before the parents actually cut him off. And then he went, you know, seeking for the next, which the next ended up being Jan. But he tried at least 2 more times before her. And thank God the parents had enough sense to say, no, we're done. Because this exact thing could have happened to their children.
Well, and that's what's so friggin' crazy, is clearly he wasn't so amazing at what he was doing that everyone was fooled. So how did these parents miss every fucking warning sign?
Yep.
Because they went way past the point that these other parents had. These other parents cut it off long before he was kidnapping their kid.
Yep.
And there were so many things that should have told them that this is not right. This isn't normal. And they just continued to allow it. I don't get it.
So this is November 20th, 1974. This is day 35. Joe, Robert's brother, actually gets a call from Robert, and he's saying to Joe, he's saying, I need you to call Marianne, and I need you to tell her to give me and Jan permission to be married in the United States, because we are married in Mexico, but they won't let us leave until our marriage is valid in the U.S.
Well, they wouldn't let them enter.
Yes.
That was the problem,
Yes.
is he knew he wasn't going to get back into this country.
Yes. So it was confirmed they were married in Mexico. And I think it said you only had to be 12, which is fucking crazy. I'm sure now it's different. I hope.
I wouldn't bank on it. There's some states here where I think it's 14.
Which is fucking insane. So here she is in Mexico, and she's now married. And which, by the way, like, they don't even tell, like, how they got there.
I know, there's all of a sudden they're just married, and there's no explanation about what happened between day 5 and day 35.
Yes, like, we're missing an entire month of context. And like, they've fled the country, they've gotten married, they now are trying to come back. For what reason? Like, you're all of a sudden, why wouldn't you just live your days out in Mexico? Because this was your plan, to seclude her and to
Right.
marry her. Why not just stay?
Yeah, and they never really say why he wanted to come back into the
Yes.
US, because at this point he's gotten away with it.
Yes,
And the only
completely.
thing that can foil his plan now is coming back.
Yes. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand.
I mean, thank God he did.
Yes. Yes.
As far as, being this guy who has thought so far ahead, I wish they had explained better what his thought process was, because so far he's really thought out a lot of his plan, and this just seems very unnecessary to his plan.
Yes.
It's his undoing, essentially.
So the Mexican police actually came, they found where they were. They came and they rescued Jan, and they arrested Robert and they put him in jail. And I guess at some point Robert asks about speaking to Jan, and he gives her some prompts, which I will read now. The prompts that he gave to Jan were that she had to go and tell her parents that he messed up and he took it too far, which is basically like him telling her, please convince your parents to forgive me. She could not talk about the allergy pills or the vitamins. She couldn't talk about the aliens or the mission, which, since she couldn't talk about either of them, she couldn't talk about the sex.
Right.
And she was also not allowed to talk to any men, including her own father, which was just so strange to me. Like, but I get it. It's power play.
I get that it was part of the power play, but at the same time, keeping her away from her dad, it's not like, if she wasn't going to tell her mom, she wasn't going to tell her dad.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I can think of is that he was concerned that, Bob was catching on to what was going on.
Yeah.
And I feel like, Bob definitely caught on a lot sooner than Marianne did.
Yeah, that bitch was dumb as hell. I'm not gonna lie. I'm sure she's a sweet lady, but she was dumb. So he told her that if she broke any of these rules, that Karen would go blind, that her father would be, the way he described it was removed, which Jan knew that meant he would be killed. And then Susan would be taken, therefore she would carry out the mission. Which, obviously, he's scaring her into doing all of this by that time. But I also just think about, would he have taken her younger sister? Like, I wonder if that was his plan. If that once she became too old for him, essentially, would he take her younger sister? And of course, they never speak on that topic again, and they don't bring up if he really showed any attraction towards the other sisters. I assume not. I assume the plan was always Jan, but like, it's just the thought in the back of my mind.
I would imagine that once Jan got too old for his liking, he would have to move on to a whole other family, because these people may be stupid, but I don't think they're that stupid. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, like at this point, I don't know. I wish I could hope with you,
Right.
but I don't think I can. So Marianne and Bob actually flew over to Mexico so that they could pick her up. And as soon as they get to the Mexican jail and, they're reuniting and they're hugging and whatever, and they're crying, she just immediately starts going into about how she's concerned about Robert. Jan is concerned about Robert. And because she's telling herself, well, now he's in jail and he's going to be in Mexico while I'm back home in Pocatello. And the mission, what about the mission?
She has this internal clock that she is so terrified of.
Yes.
She only has until she's 16 to get pregnant.
Yeah.
From what she understands. So she sees this as losing time.
Yeah. And in her mind, her entire race is doomed.
Right.
Because, these are her people.
And then her little sister's going to be having to take over.
Yeah, and horrible things are about to happen to her family. Like, she doesn't want anything bad to happen to any of them. So they get back home, and they're getting settled in. And then the Brobergs actually sent the marriage certificate back to Mexico, which then they
should have put it in a fruit basket.
But they got the marriage annulled, luckily. I assume it probably hadn't been that long that they had been married. But regardless, thank God they were able to do that.
It probably had more to do with the fact that even in most places where you can get married that young, there's supposed to be parental permission. And clearly there couldn't have been any because none of them lived there.
Yes. So at this point, Robert is sent back to the US and he is indicted for kidnapping. Jan has done a physical and they have shown that, or they've seen that there's been no physical or sexual trauma, that her hymen is still intact. So they think nothing of it, which I'm just so like, I don't care if it doesn't show any of those things. He had her for 35 days. You can't tell me he didn't do a goddamn thing to her.
And how do you not realize that? Like, that would 100% be my only thought.
Yes.
Would be like, I don't care what this exam said. He's been doing something, because there's no other reason for him to take her.
And especially if you are sexually frustrated with your wife that you got to ask Bob to jerk you off, there's no way you wouldn't have done something with that little girl for 35 days.
Right.
Like, there's no fucking way. So Pete actually advised the Brobergs to basically break contact with Robert Berchtold.
With the man that just kidnapped their child for 35 days.
Yes, and took her to Mexico and married her. But they ignore it, basically. They're like, oh, yeah. But then they continue contact with him. And so then Gail Berchtold goes on and she asks the Brobergs if they would drop the charges against Robert. And so, then she goes on to threaten them, actually. And she says, well, if you don't drop the charges, then I'm going to tell the LDS Church that you had homosexual relations with my husband.
This is what makes me think this woman knew all along.
Yeah.
Because if he gave a shit about, keeping a secret from her, why would he have told her that he was having a homosexual relationship with another man?
Yeah.
I 100% think that she knew that he was a sick fuck, and that she either was crazy enough to still love him,
mm-hmm.
or she just did not want to have to figure out life as a single woman
of 5 children
that, had no actual work experience, and just thought this was better. This was the plan.
So because of this threat, the Brobergs actually signed the affidavits and they dropped the charges.
Again, adults only thinking about themselves and not this kid.
So Robert's trial was actually postponed and he was released on his own recognizance. And then he moved to Ogden, Utah to go, and he would stay and work with his brother who, I don't know if he owned the car sales place or if he just also worked there. But he would go and work there, and his wife and family stayed behind in Pocatello, but he would come and he would visit every weekend. So he was still pretty frequently in town. It wasn't just like he was gone off to a new life. To which one weekend he broke into the Broberg house, which I'm sure it wasn't actually a break-in. I'm sure it was just him walking through the front door quietly while everyone was asleep. And he went down to the basement and he talked with Jan, and they spoke about the mission and about how, they were still going to carry it out, and, they'd figure it all out, and they'd be together, and just all of that. And like, just, him obviously sleeping there at night and them giving him permission was already weird. Like, that's super fucking strange. But just him not being able to help himself so badly that he went into their house unbeknownst to them to go and speak to her. Like, because, if he had to do that, then I guess what confuses me is that, if the Brobergs didn't comply with what Pete Welch was telling them about keeping away from him, then I feel as though, that meant that they still contacted him, but then why did he break into their house? Like, that whole thing is just very confusing to me.
Yeah.
So, and maybe it was just because he broke in so that they could discuss the mission, and maybe they were keeping contact, but they possibly were supervising Jan now around Robert, so he needed to speak to her one-on-one about the mission. I don't know.
I just can't imagine they were letting her have any sort of contact with him.
I know. Or that they themselves were keeping contact.
Right.
Like, are you kidding? So at some point, Jan and Robert were starting to write love letters back and forth to one another. And, she would also, which this part is so fucking weird to me. So she would get these letters from other kids in school that would like indicate of like where and when to, go somewhere and get more parts of the mission.
So what I want to understand is where the fuck are these other kids getting these notes? Like, is he just walking past the school and he's like, "Hey, psst, kid, give this note to Jan." Like,
Yeah.
I don't.
Like, hey, Jan Broberg?
Right. Like,
Give her this. Like, sliding them a 20, but it's like a fucking note. Like, you are so fucking weird, dude.
and you can't tell me that other kids didn't think that was fucking weird.
So in spring of 1975, Robert would actually call Marianne, and he would, start telling her all these things about, oh, I love you. Oh, I'm gonna leave Gail so that we can be together, and just kind of, working his way to lure her back in and really get her back close to him because he needed to secure his connection to Jan. So, making Marianne fall in love with him, which she did. She admitted to doing so. Just made the whole process so much easier. And so he convinced her fully that he was going to be getting a divorce from Gail. And so at this point, they actually had sexual intercourse. She admits to it.
I don't understand how a man who disappeared with your kid for over a month and married her, you're having sex with.
Yep.
I don't, like I said so many times, I can't wrap my brain around I can't wrap my brain around believing that they're naive, that they're this naive,
Yeah.
that they're this dumb. I honestly think there is just a part of them that, especially Marianne, who was like, fuck it, I love him.
Yeah, it's selfish. So actually, Bob filed for divorce. But that didn't really stick long because Bob and Marianne basically had like a little kiss and make up moment. And then it was fine. And she was like, oh, I'll never do it again. I love you. I don't want any contact with B, which, you're still continuing to call him B. Like even now, and maybe she's just doing that for the story, but it just sounds so natural the way she says it, and it's just so empathetic. And so, the divorce never gets filed, and they stay together, and then it just keeps getting worse.
And I 100% believe that B would have left his wife if Marianne had left Bob, because then he could marry Marianne and have unfettered access to Jan.
Yeah.
And when Jan gets too old, 2 other little girls right behind her.
Yep, exactly. So the documentary states that in June of 1976, which is 20 months after the kidnapping, finally, that Berchtold agreed to a plea deal. He pled guilty to felonious kidnapping. The judge only sentenced him to 5 years at that point, but then pretty quickly reduced it to 45 days. And he was actually supposed to report to that 45-day sentence within 3 months. So it wasn't just like we're going to take you from the courthouse to the jail. It was, well, see you in 3 months.
Whenever you want, just drop in.
Yeah, like, are you kidding me? He kidnapped this 13-year-old girl for over a month, and you just are like, and I just want to know, like, I think the whole thing about him getting his case reduced was probably, like, but that's also what I don't understand, is that he's had counseling through the LDS church, he's had encounters with 2 other girls, like, how is he getting this reduction? Does he know the judge?
There's so many things that were not taken seriously,
Yes.
back then. And I mean, especially against women and girls, I feel like, it's been a long struggle and we're still struggling.
Mm-hmm.
It was legal until I believe the 80s to like beat your wife. That there was really nothing that could be done about it. It was pretty recent. It's been in your lifetime where it's become illegal for men to rape their wives. Before, it wasn't a thing. It was believed that it wasn't even possible. So I can totally see honestly, to be 100% honest, I can see a judge doing that now, even
Yeah,
because
honestly.
our system is so fucked up.
Yeah,
I would love to say, well, things were different back then,
but
but they're not much better now.
no, not really. Like nothing's
We've
really
we've made a
changed.
lot more things illegal that didn't used to be, as far as, violence and sexual violence against women and children, but the punishments haven't gotten much better.
No. So it is confirmed that at this time, Jan is in fact 13 when Robert Birchtold actually goes out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and he buys like a family fun center. Like, and I don't know exactly like what it entails, but I mean, you have to bring your children there.
Right.
And like these people don't even know what they're really bringing their kids into, a business owned by a fucking pedophile. Like that's insane. Like it felt like a trap.
Oh, it 100% was. And there were no laws to protect these people. There wasn't a registry like there is now.
Yeah.
There weren't laws where you couldn't be around children after you had already been, you know, uh, found guilty of these things. They were free to just
Live
go
life.
back out and reoffend.
And so, he tells Jan about this, or Jan finds out in some way or another, and she starts begging Marianne if she can go out there and work there for the summer. She wants to go out and work at the fun center, and she wants to be with B because she's got to complete the mission. And
But she,
so
I think, also at this point thinks she's in love with him.
I think so as well. I think she sees him as like a husband
Right.
rather than, before how she saw him as a father figure. She now sees him as her husband. And so, mom and dad are saying, no, 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 you're not going out there. This is after her abduction. And they're saying, no, you won't. And then, Jan, in usual, teenager fashion, she starts to lash out, and she's, not being her usual self. So Marianne caves and lets her go, puts her on a plane because Jan has threatened to hike there. So
Let her try. And
yes,
when she leaves the house, you call the police. Like,
yes,
and this is, I'm going to say it again. You can't be this fucking naive. You can't. And again, selfishness. Jan was being so much of a problem that Marianne was willing to send her off to a man who abducted her because she just didn't want to deal with it.
yeah. So Jan gets there and she stays for about 2 weeks. And during this stay, Robert tells Jan like, oh, I'm getting a divorce from my wife, so you and I can get married. And they're talking about the mission, and then I think at some point he gets back into the mindset that he had before of when he abducted her, and all of a sudden he starts making calls back to the Broberg's place and being like, I'm gonna take her to places you'll never find us. Like, oh, okay. Like, and you really just sent her there into a fucking trap.
And the FBI agent at this point has to be like, give me a fucking break.
Literally.
Why are you making my job so hard? Why are you making my life so complicated? We just got your kid back from Mexico. What are you doing?
Yeah. So, after 2 weeks, she goes back home and she's not quite herself, and she's kind of gloomy, and she's being rude, and she's just not being, she's not being nice to her family, but it's a part of trying to separate herself emotionally from them to make what she has to do easier, what she has to go and do with Robert.
What kills me is they make it sound like she was this horrible monster of a teenager when even if she hadn't been going through all of this with B, it still sounds pretty normal for a teenager to be gloomy and moody and not really want to communicate well, and start to withdraw. I think that's just normal I was that way, you were that way, and that's all so normal. Teenage angst is a thing for a reason. But they act like she needed to be put in a mental hospital
I
because she was
know.
just so terrible to deal with. And again, I'm just like, do you people like, not only were you terrible at raising a preteen, but apparently you're also terrible at raising a teenager because you know nothing about child rearing at
Literally.
all.
So now we have reached August 10th, 1976. This is Tuesday, and this is day 1 of her second abduction. So she ended up leaving home and she left a note for her parents, which I guess, this one's a bit hard because, she ran away. It wasn't really like they just let her, they let her go off to Jackson Hole, but they didn't let her go off with him this time.
Right, but they've put her in such a position where she's had so much exposure to him that this was bound to happen when she felt safe enough, as she's grown, to dare to leave on her own.
Yeah.
They've basically put her on this path.
So she left a note for her parents, which I can't remember exactly what it said, but basically it entailed that, she was leaving and that she wasn't going to tell anybody where she was, but she was safe. And so, Robert, after they discover the note, he calls the Brobergs. He says that Jan told him she's on the run, but she wouldn't tell him where she was. Which it ended up being that Robert actually enrolled her into an all-girls Catholic boarding school all the way over in California. And he put her under a false name, and he told the nuns there that he's her father and he needs a place for her to be.
They were hiding from people that were after him.
Yes.
So if people came asking for Jan, to alert him because they were the bad people.
Yeah. He put her under Janice Tobler, which I'm like, why not just change the whole name?
Right.
At this point, the Brobergs actually wait to call Pete Welch. And they wait 2 weeks into her running away. Which then at this point, Pete, and he goes and talks to Robert. And, Robert is concerned about her whereabouts, doesn't know where she is. And, coming out with an elaborate story of, oh, I just have no idea. But, of course, as we've seen so far, I don't think Pete is going to really believe jack shit that Robert's telling him.
He's a lot smarter than the parents.
Yeah. So on September 1st, Berchtold actually began his trial, which was about 3 weeks into Jan running away from home. And so it had then turned out that the 45-day sentence that he had gotten, he actually only spent 10 of those days in jail and got off with good behavior.
Shocker.
What a shocker. Another person on good behavior who's a piece of shit. So at this point, Robert moves over to Salt Lake City, Utah to move into his motorhome. And then he kind of just goes off the radar. Nobody really knows where he's gone from there. And of course, it's a motorhome. He can just pick it up and put it wherever he wants to.
Right.
And so after going off the radar, he keeps in contact with Marianne, which, she tells Pete that she's been getting these phone calls from Robert. And he says, okay, just, we're going to set up where we can tape your phone calls and just try and keep him on these calls for as long as you can to try and get as much information out of him as you can. And so, he, at some point, I don't know how many phone calls in it was after, but I think he must have gotten some sort of suspicion because he suddenly just says to her, if you're setting a trap for me, I'll kill you. Like, what? Like, where did that just come from? Like, something had to have thrown him off about what she was saying. And I wish I knew what it was.
Maybe it was because she seemed like she was believing everything he was saying, and even he was like, there's no fucking way you're this dumb.
To which Robert states to Marianne that there will be nobody for him but Jan.
I have to wonder if at any point she was ever jealous of Jan. I don't know. She doesn't seem like the type that would have enough thought in her head because, again, Jan was married to this dude in Mexico and she still went and fucked him.
Yes.
Like, you married my kid, but that's cool. Let's do it.
So, in November of 1976, which is about approximately 90 days into Jan's disappearance, Pete actually went over for another interview with Robert. And when he walked in, Robert has all of these like huge, he's got pictures of all sizes, but especially like huge
Like
ones.
this
Like
size.
this size of Jan. Like he has turned his motorhome into a shrine for Jan Broberg, a 13-year-old girl.
And the pictures were not
Appropriate.
appropriate. Like
No.
you can see her underwear.
So November 11th, 1976, which is counted as day 102 of Jan's disappearance, Robert was seen making a call in the phone booth, and he was there for about 10 to 15 minutes. And after he had left, the investigators went in, and there was a number written down, which was for the all-girls Catholic school. They gave them a call, and they said, we're looking for Jan Broberg, and they said, we have nobody there by that name. And so they had to really go in and explain the entire situation. And eventually, the school figured out that she was under the name of Janice Tobler. And the next day, Robert was arrested, and Jan was once again rescued and brought back home. So, January 24th, 1977, which Jan has been home for about 38 days at this point, Bob, her father, receives a call from one of his employees that his business is on fire. And Jan actually states a moment she remembers where her father is looking at it, and he just throws his arms up and goes, "Let it burn."
It definitely was a moment of clarity of what was important and what needed to be important in his life.
And I think that I think that he was probably also thankful for the fact that it was his business and not his home. Later, it was found out through investigation that Robert had actually paid two former prisoners to go and burn the business down
Oh my
himself.
God, another shocking turn of events.
I can't believe that happened. So Robert had actually beaten all of the court cases that he was up against, but they did file him to go to a mental facility in June of 1977. Unfortunately, he got out within less than 6 months of being court ordered there.
By today's standards, that would have never happened. It takes a lot more. Back then, it didn't.
Yes.
And he wasn't crazy. So it's not that far of a stretch to say that once he got there and acted normal, the doctors were like, this is so weird. You're fine.
Yeah. So in June of 1978, which is about 18 months after Jan has returned home, at this point, she's now 15. Her 16th birthday is coming up close. She's getting really scared because, all she can think about is this mission, and she hasn't had contact with Robert and who knows how long. And, she's just so scared. And so, at 15, almost 16, she says to herself, well, if my birthday comes around and I haven't completed the mission, I'm going to get a gun and I'm going to go ask my sister if she wants to go through with this. And if she says no, I'm going to kill her and then myself. She's a 15-year-old child.
Yeah, but she's been so deeply brainwashed that she believes that this is what's going to happen.
Like, that's so incredibly sad.
I felt awful when she was talking about that she, even after all of this, even after, they had rescued her and the FBI told her she was kidnapped and, that she never shared this part of what he had told her. So she had no one to tell her that it wasn't real.
Yes. So, her 16th birthday ends up rolling around and, she's been suspicious for a little bit because, things haven't been happening like they usually were. And then her 16th birthday comes and everyone's okay. Everyone's alive. Nobody's blind. Nobody's taken. And she really comes to the realization of, oh my God, all of it was a lie. And she opens up to her sisters about everything, which her sisters, they support her fully. And, they say, you have to tell mom and dad, which she does. She ends up telling them everything. Like every single detail, and they spoke about how it just absolutely broke their hearts to hear all of this. Jan actually states that at this point, by the age of 16, once everything basically stopped, she estimates that Robert tried to engage with her in a sexual manner about or more 200 times.
I'm honestly surprised that it's not more.
Yeah, honestly. And it probably is more,
Yeah.
honestly. Because there's probably so much shit that he did to her that in her sleep that she doesn't know about. And she probably is counting it in a little bit, but I think it's probably a higher number.
Yeah.
So we jump forward about 28 years, and it's actually shown that Jan and Marianne Broberg have decided to write a book about these events together. They go to several different events, speaking about the book and about her experiences, and it's found out that Robert is going to these events as well. He's making his way in as like a 70-something-year-old man. He's making his way into these events to sit there and listen to her and just stalk her into her adult years.
But I almost guarantee that he's getting some satisfaction over just hearing her retell what happened.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's basically like when killers retell a detective the story of how they killed someone, and you can see the way they get thrilled by
Right.
it. I'm sure it was a thrill for him. Robert eventually was threatening them about the books and the tours, and he was saying that they were always lying about the stuff that, he supposedly did, and that he was always given access to Jan by her parents. So Jan actually filed for and was approved for a stalking injunction against Robert, which the typical stalking injunction, you only get approved for about 3 years or less. This one was actually approved for the rest of his life, which was incredible that they allowed that.
It's about time somebody fucking did something.
Exactly. There was another point where before she got the stalking injunction, she was actually being, after she was going to these events, she was being protected by, it's a group called Bikers Against Child Abuse, other known as BACA.
Yep.
And she was using them as her security. And there was a point where he was driving into the lot of one of these events, and the bikers recognized him. And so they all started like chasing after him, and one of them jumped on the hood of his car. And so he got scared, and then he sped up and then braked really hard so that the biker went flying. And they got injured kind of badly from it as well, because in possession of a firearm under a felony. So he was arrested with 3 felonies and 2 misdemeanors after that. After the 3 felonies and the 2 misdemeanors, he was going to have his court date coming up, and they were going to settle on how long he'd be going to jail. And he actually ended up killing himself before the court date ever came around. I assume it was, I'm too old for this, or, I'm not going back. But I'm also just like, I think part of it was that he knows he's going to get and this is so stupid. This is where the court system fails. He knew he was going to get a longer sentence for being in possession of a firearm than when he raped Jan numerous amount of times. Like, he knew that was going to be a long sentence.
Yeah, this was going to be a worse sentence.
Yes.
But also, knowing that it's going to be a longer sentence, for some reason, people that perpetrate crimes on people of this nature tend to be fucking cowards.
Yeah.
And I, they have no problems inflicting harm on others, but then they're terrified of serving the sentence that they deserve.
Yeah.
And they kill themselves.
Yeah. And it happens so much.
I know. And, and then the family or the victim does, if the victim was murdered, then the family doesn't get justice. And then if the victim is alive, they don't get justice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Jan was ever going to get justice because, again, like you said, the only real reason he was going to actually do some jail time for real was because he had a fucking gun.
Yeah. Jan has actually been in contact with 6 different women who were sexually abused by Robert Berchtold. And one actually had been a case of rape, and he was only in jail for a year.
And that's the other thing, that's so important about the way that, jails network now. And I mean, the crazy thing is you think that they're all up to date and connected with each other, that there's a database, but there's not one main database that all jails are connected to. So there's still a lot of people that slip through the cracks.
Yeah. So this was actually an article written by John Wildman on the website Films Gone Wild. The original name for the documentary was actually called Forever Be, before they changed it to Abducted in Plain Sight. Exactly. They changed it because they did not want to make it seem like it was a romance movie. They didn't want people to get a wrong narrative about it, basically. But they didn't want to really hide what they were doing. They wanted to, basically, what they were doing is they wanted to make it obvious as to what people were getting into when they opened this documentary. And so they settled on Abducted in Plain Sight.
I'm glad because that one sounds like the title of a romance movie, and two, it makes it sound like he's the main character.
Exactly.
Ew.
So on the Refinery 29, this is an article by Sarah Hendricks. Bob actually called the police first. He called them the first night that Robert and Jan went missing. And then basically what they told Bob was that the sheriff's office felt as though because it was the first night, they didn't think that he had kidnapped her.
I did get the feeling from these interviews that Bob definitely clued in a lot faster.
So Gail did divorce Robert about different sources have told me different things, that she divorced him before the second kidnapping, she divorced him during the second kidnapping. It's very unclear, but at some point she did leave. So this is actually from a website called Ranker. This is by Jody Smith, and she was actually citing an interview with the true crime obsessed Robert Hines, and he was actually interviewing the director Sky Borgman. So before he ever kidnapped Jan the first time, he made a joke to Marianne. Robert did. He made a joke, and he asked what she would do if he stole her daughter. And she said, well, I know you'd never do that, and I always know where she is. And then he basically tried to joke again and say, I don't want her anyways, I want you.
I feel like if some man had said that to me, every fiber of my being would have known something was fucking wrong.
Because what does that mean?
Yeah.
Why are you saying that to me?
Yeah.
Robert actually, while he was in Mexico, and it's not clear as to if this was when he was in Mexico with Jan, or I assume this was probably a different point that he was in Mexico, he tried to adopt a little girl and take her over the border. And the border control denied them, and actually, they rescued her and brought her back to her family. So there was actually a point into Jan's second kidnapping that Marianne went to go meet up with Robert, because apparently they were going to, share information about Jan's whereabouts. And she brought a gun with her, and she was actually going to confront him with the gun. I guess at some point she got too nervous and she didn't end up doing it. But
this lady's got no follow through.
I know. I'm like, you have so much bark and no bite. It drives me insane. Bite a little more, it'll help you.
Right.
So she never, took the gun out on him. He was never aware that it was even there, which I wish she did.
Right.
Like, point the gun at him and tell me where my daughter is, motherfucker. So yeah, I mean, overall, it was so insane. It was just someone that they had brought into their home and they had given so much trust to, and he played them so fucking hard. And they were eating out of the palm of his hand. This is definitely in my top 5, like, most craziest, bizarre things that I have ever watched.
I definitely think this is either my number 1 or number 2, because I felt like no matter how fucking crazy it got, 5 minutes later, it was crazier. Like it wasn't a roller coaster. It just kept going up. And, I at one point you're just like, I want off. I can't take anymore.
I'm emotionally distressed.
What the fuck? They say your jaw's on the floor, but literally my whole body was, especially, and I think that was the part where Bob jerked him off. Like I never. You may see a lot of twists and turns coming in books and movies. This is not one that anyone ever expected to hear him say.
So that'll conclude today's episode of Doc Talk. This was the episode about Abducted in Plain Sight, and we hope that you so enjoyed it. We thank you all so much for watching, for supporting us, liking, commenting, all the stuff that you do. So if you look over on the board, that will be our next hint for what our next episode will be. So if you want to go ahead and comment and take some guesses as to what it might be, we would so appreciate that. And thank you guys so much for coming out.
Bye.
Bye.